the mistrust in the healthcare system, I just want to give a few historical facts that may add to the mistrust. Um, the Tuskegee syphilis study conducted between 1932 and 1972. The study itself was just unethical as its participants were not informed of the nature of the experiment and were denied proper treatment even after penicillin had become available as a cure. At least 100 men died, and numerous wives and children were affected by this travesty that was funded by the U.S. government. Just another example, Dr. Marion Sims. He was also called the father of gynecology until recently. Um, he conducted gynecological experiments on primarily enslaved women in the 1940s. He operated on multiple women during his research, and Sims performed his gynecological experiments without using anesthesia. The women on whom he operated on endured excruciating pain without the benefit of anesthesia that was available, and it still believed he believed that black people could tolerate a higher threshold of pain, and that's
Mhm.
something that we deal with to this day. um, we have a dozen people of color ready to share their stories in about this 40-minute session. Weigh in the comments if on social media if you want to add to this conversation. We can start with the general fear of going to the doctor and where it stems from. For me, just growing up, going to the doctor was when you had something severely wrong with you, or what your parents deemed that was severely wrong with you. For colds and cuts and things like that, we would always have some home remedy, a hot toddy for a cold, or uh, just Vic salve for a stuffy nose, and things like that. And it wasn't until I got older that I realized that it was not just a financial reason why we didn't go to the doctor. It was actually mistrust from all of the things that were passed down from my parents' parents, from their parents, about exactly like the Tuskegee and Dr. Sims that were using us as experiments. I know through our planning session that other warriors had the same experience. Juanita, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. As far as feeling like a guinea pig, as far as fighting for the right to just exist as a P.A.D. patient, uh, getting misdiagnosed, not getting diagnosed at all, um, paying for travel to go out of town for care that I should have been able to get in state. You know, um, my story is so long and so vast with a lot of different flips and turns in it. Right now, I would just like to hear from someone else and share their story.
John and Amy are here, husband and wife, and they have been fighting for John's legs. I'm curious if you want to weigh in on Charles' question about how, fears and mistrust that you may have grown up with in your household based on what you've heard from your elders have influenced, your mindset when it comes to healthcare, and then ultimately then your experience yourself with the next generation. John?
Well, Kim, how you doing? I just want to share what the other guy said. When I was growing up, going to the doctor to me, or going to the hospital, was like death. Like you was gonna die if you went to the hospital. Because every time that any family member of mine went to the hospital, chances of them coming out of the hospital was slim. They didn't come out. It was, and growing up. That's how I experienced, you know, going to the doctor. That's why most black people don't want to go to the doctor, because they know when they go there, you know, they may not come out. That was my experience. My dad, he was diagnosed with lung cancer at 45. Okay, he didn't go get chemo. He didn't do none of it. When they said this is what you had, he continued to work. He didn't go get no kind of treatment, and he lasted until he was like 62 is when he died from that. But he didn't get no chemo. He didn't get anything. But during that time, he knew all along that he had cancer, but he still didn't go to the doctor. And he wasn't surprised when we found out that this is what he had, and and he was ready to go get treatment for it. He didn't seem upset at all because he knew what he had, and and that was that. So just that everybody on the panel who's had this experience of going to the doctor, I had the same experience, the same thing with my my toes being cut off the same way. It was just fear. It was fear, and not being told the truth. Fear and not. When they see me, they just say, "Okay, he black. He's been working this long. He smokes and he does this. He does that." And that's how they treated me. Everything went accordingly. Okay, you got one toe going to be cut off, and now here's your leg. It just went like that until we met Kim. To God brought us to her. That's the reason why I'm standing right now. That's the reason why my legs. Why I'm keeping my leg, because otherwise I probably wouldn't have. I don't. It's just right now. It's just scary to think of. Not only me, but other people going through the same thing, and they're not knowledgeable. All this knowledge I got today about all this was about black people. I didn't know. All I knew is when I was growing up, not if he was black, or not to go there, not to go to the hospital. So that's the way I associated the hospital with with being going there, being black, and here, like I said, in 2022 is when I started going to the hospital, and when they started treating me just that same way. I told the doctor, I said, listen, I quit smoking, I quit this. He didn't believe none of that. Okay, then he just took it as he just didn't. They didn't trick. They told me the same thing. After they figured out that they couldn't open up one of my limbs, they said, okay, you're not a candidate for nothing else. You can't, and leave. They just left it at that. They just left me just out there, no referrals to somebody else that they knew. And it was a person in the surrounding town that could have did it, but they never, nothing,
Growing up in the South, we have this thing about, we don't go to the hospital because for decades, for generations, our ancestors didn't trust, and they came from a place of, we make homemade salves, we rub stuff on, we bandage it up for a couple of days, and then you're fine. We didn't talk about diabetes. They said, stuff like, oh, you have sugar. We didn't know what sugar was. We just thought we were sweet like that. We got sugar. Okay. But when we found out people were, being amputated left and right, we still didn't understand, because all we still heard was, oh, they had sugar. We didn't know anything about diabetes until we got up into our teens and adulthood, and until I was diagnosed with it. I would see family members with amputations, and that's the first thing that would come to mind. And then it was, oh, it's just diabetes. Not understanding that these amputations was happening more so because of peripheral artery disease than anything. Mm-hmm. But to us, growing up in the South, in the country, without, many resources, you had one doctor in the town over, and he primarily dealt with the white community. And if you came in, he was shocked to see you, and he wants to get you out of his office really quick. Those are the type things that we grew up, as Black Americans. We didn't have the wherewithal to say we want a second opinion. Because they didn't want to see us anyway. Mm-hmm. We don't want to ask too many questions. We just want to get out of there. Okay, you've seen us, we gotta go. Because we're already untrusting and knowing it. You're not gonna do the things you did for my grandmother. You're not gonna do for Miss Sally over there. Miss Sally is gonna get the best care. Whatever we can do to fight this, we're gonna fight it. Where my grandmother, she had pancreatic cancer. She died from cancer. But the treatments that they gave someone else other than my grandmother, I know it was inadequate. I know that, you know. So yeah, we grew up fearing doctors for more than one reason. More than one reason. We've had a lot of family members went in and never came out, and we never knew why.
Yeah.
You know, so it's a lot of different reasons for us. And in order to build that trust, it's difficult. It's very difficult. So when we let you into our circle, you're in. We say you're family, you're family. So for you to break that is devastating for us.
Ms. Juanita, I want to add something to what you just said, which is very, very important. Talking about trust. And this is what I mentioned earlier, Dr. Brown also mentioned earlier. So this is why it becomes really, really important, and Charles mentioned that earlier as well, to have a seat at the table. Meaning, if we have a large number of physicians, Blacks, Hispanics, participating in the care of these patients, who also have an understanding of the cultural background, then it becomes easier to break down some of these barriers. Now, I'm going to share a perfect example. Talk about barriers. So I grew up, I mentioned multiple times, I grew up in Congo. It's a place very much like Mr. John just mentioned, where there's no trust. So in Congo, most people go to the physician when something's wrong. So if you ran your knee against the wall, you're in pain, you go look for a physician. But sitting at home, blood pressure 180, it's not giving you any trouble, but we know it will. And so that's why it becomes important to really educate the community to take away these barriers, so that way we don't wait for those last minutes, because by then the clock has been ticking for a long time and we're in trouble. So early checkups, early detection, early treatment, but we want people that will deliver the care in a way you feel cared for.
Exactly.
Meaning that experience when you walk into a doctor's office and you feel like he or she wants to leave as quickly as possible, you walk out of that office with more questions than answers.
Exactly.
That's very difficult. You know, for me, I'm a very lucky man. I just grew up in a big, gigantic family, and I'm just used to that many people. So not uncommonly, I'm hugging my patients. Some of them don't even call me by my name. They just call me baby, honey. I look like their grandkids. I look like their nephews that they left at home. And so all those things really make a difference. And when I sit down and say, please, you have to take aspirin, you have to take this medicine, they understand, because there's that special bond. And it's not easy. My mother, an educated woman, and I am her son, and her father, my grandfather, was also my best friend, a medical professional. It took me nearly 5 years to convince my mother to take medication for hypertension. She had hypertension, but every day she had a reason to not, because culturally, you just don't take medications every day. But I had to convince her, and now she is. Now, I could have also said, well, forget it. Why am I going to waste my time doing this? And she, who knows, all these years, she'd have had a stroke by now, or something like that. But she's okay. But it took effort on my part. I made it a point to not take care of her. I made it a point to have somebody else take care of her, so I can be on the sideline, but knowing that they're going to give her good care. Now, there's nowhere in the world she ran out of medicines. She makes sure she has it all, and she's doing very well. Like I said, she's an educated woman, but she grew up in a country where people just don't take medications every day for no reason, in a sense. Why am I taking something for hypertension when it's not giving me any trouble? But we know what's going to happen. Same thing with diabetes. Early on, it might not give you any trouble. But if we don't spend the effort and the time to educate the community at large, we're always going to be having these issues towards the end, when people are high risk and losing their limbs. So we need to reach to our children. We need to go to the community. We need to reach out to people with open hearts and explain things to people so people can understand. Because if you just want to check the box and say, oh, by the way, smoking does this, that's not enough. You have to sit down, you have to talk to people. And that's how we're going to make a change. So it's really important to really come with our hearts and love and affection to really get these messages across to make a difference. Without it, I think it's extremely difficult. So that's what I want to share in that regard.
I agree. I agree with you, doctor. I really do agree with you. We all have to open up our hearts. And this is our way of doing it by educating and trying to reach out to others that don't understand what's going on with their bodies, to be able to, you know, answer or ask the questions that need to be asked.
Or even just understanding where the patient is coming from. I took care of a gentleman a couple years ago, 63, divorced, and he lived at home with his parents. And he was the sole caretaker for elderly father and elderly mother. So when I saw him, I was more motivated to take care of him, not because of him, but because of his parents.
Yeah.
And I just knew deep inside of me that if this man goes, automatically those two other parents are also gone. So that was my motivation. But I could have easily just said, oh, you have P.A.D, and that's the end of that. But the extra 30 minutes I spoke with him, whatever, I was able to find out how meaningful his health was and how much it meant to the rest of his family. So him getting amputated would have affected him in a very negative manner. And so, but that was extra 30 seconds or so that I spoke with him to get that information. So when you do that, it allows you to go the extra mile for folks to really help them.
Well, you know, I think one of the big issues is location, location, location. You know, a lot of people in certain areas of the country and outside of the country, you know, because of where they live, the cultural background of where they live, they do have a lot of bona fide fears, and those fears are usually based on misinformation or knowledge. We tend to fear things we don't know, we don't understand. And that in itself will keep a lot of people from going to the doctor, going to hospitals. And unfortunately, you know, even the least little thing that happens, sometimes if you don't go to the doctor promptly, you know, can lead to a very serious situation. And so, you know, we are left with, how do we get the information out? How do we let people know what's going on before it happens to them? Fortunately, my father was in the military, so we did travel around a lot. But also in being in the military, I was exposed to a lot of different types of culture, a vast variety of types of people. And I didn't have so much of the trepidation about going to doctors and hospitals, but I still had my leg amputated. And a lot of that I feel is, you know, and I felt like I was being treated right by the doctors. They were doing everything they could, but the atmosphere of, you know, going to a doctor and having it in my mind, I know this is going to be bad. I know I'm not going to make it out of this hospital. And that's something that a lot of people have lived with all of their lives, that type of culture. And it's nobody's fault, but I feel also that a lot of people need to take responsibility for themselves. You know, a lot of times when people go to the doctor, they do whatever the doctor says because they have been taught that doctors go to college, they know all of this information, they must know what they're talking about. And that's not always the case. Hello?
In terms of the experiences that you've had and in losing your leg, you have kids as well, and seeing what you've gone through, what is the conversation that you have with your kid to stop the cycle and to make sure that they don't have fears of going to the doctor and that they do get to the doctor sooner rather than later?
Well, I think mostly it's a lifestyle. My kids know that I go to the doctor if I need to go to the doctor. And I have one daughter who is a special needs. And, in having that type of openness in our family, knowing that it is not as scary a place as sometimes people have been told. And I have never generated that type of atmosphere. And that in itself lends to them being more comfortable in going to the doctor and seeing a specialist or whatever the case may need.
Right. Thank you, Rodney. And I know that we have Judith Taylor, who is still on and hasn't been able to jump in as of yet. Judith, what really, in your experience, and in your ancestry and with your parents and grandparents, what were the conversations like about the healthcare system, and how did that impact how they live their lives and their care?
I was blessed with parents who were both teachers. And so education has always been important, and awareness. But even with them, my father died when he was 38, as did everyone in his family, from cardiovascular disease. It was just assumed that this was the way it was. I watched my father have heart attacks often during my childhood. My mother didn't drive, and we had to wait for other people to help us get there because cabs didn't come into our neighborhood. That was not an option. So he sat there and waited until we could rouse someone who could come and spend the hours at the VA to get him seen. Meanwhile, in my own healthcare, my podiatrist, as a diabetic, looked at my feet all the time, but no primary care doctor. It turned out I had gout, and he referred me to his wife, who was a primary care doctor. So I had educated care, but no one saw the P.A.D. They saw the diabetes and assumed it was neuropathy. So for 10
So true.
Yeah.
yeah, and it woke me up at night, the whole deal. I did what they told me, basically lived with it. And finally, I got a different insurance that allowed me not to wait for pre-authorizations. And I went out there and found somebody who tested me with and said, yeah, you got no pulse in your toe. And finally, they were going to do surgery without checking pulses or anything, without going through what really is happening. And thank God I was blessed to find Kim. The day before they were going to put a stent from my shoulder all the way through, as Douglas Salisbury has experienced, I found Kim.
Right, the axillobifemoral bypass.
Yes, I was so grateful. And I was spared that. Now I've had 3 surgeries trying to clean out. I have a fem and a fem pop that my current doctor said should not have been done. And I'm scheduled on the 23rd to go through another surgery to revascularize. But thank God somebody is looking at it. And it took my research, and thank God for the internet. I never would have gotten in touch with Kim. And still, they do not realize how this is still affecting my life. I mean, I'm still waking up at night, etc. The network of P.A.D has been life-saving in terms of knowing what other people are going through, knowing. And I've been talking to other people in my world, and they too have never heard of P.A.D. One of the things that I would like to see is CMEs being required to teach this, required to do this as
Yes.
part of professional life, they will not see it. They will not put the emphasis, because even these doctors that are working with us before did not know the prevalence. So we've got to really aggressively promote this for all doctors, not just people who are specialists. And the other thing that I think would be important, Kim had a wonderful idea about, how they do the walks for cancer and all that other stuff. We need to be doing that for PAD, especially because walking is so important in building collaterals, even through walking through the pain. People don't understand that when that pain comes and you stop walking, you're doing yourself a disservice. So we need to get the word out. We have been blessed with permission by the internationally known Ricky Byers. She was married to Ricky Byers Beckwith. She was married to Michael Beckwith. But it's Rickie Byers, Byers. She has a song, Walk, Walk, Walk Like Somebody. Walk, walk, walk like you love somebody too. And she's given us permission to use that song as part of our awareness campaign. If we could have somebody who, and you all who speak with health systems and publicists, we need someone who can help us full time get the word out to the public. And if we start grassroots as well as working with the organizations, we would be able to get this as known as the pink and all that for the other things. We really need an aggressive public education campaign, because I have doctors who respect my intelligence, but they didn't see it. They didn't see that this was not neuropathy. They didn't understand that this keeping me up at night for 10 years was not just, well, live with it. So we all have to talk to the people with us, and those of you who are working with institutions. If we could join together and really be public with this, it would make a big difference.
I agree.
Can I jump in real quick?
Sure. Just I want to comment really quick on just what she was saying in terms of the walking and Ricky Byers, that we do have an initiative, and it's Prayer Walk for PAD, and we're hoping to create a day of prayer walk for PAD, and hopefully maybe we can include Ricky Byers and we can expand it to congregations across the country, which I think would be incredibly powerful. And maybe we can get Pastor Judith Taylor over here to actually lead the charge in working with the DEI team to execute on that.
I would love that. I would love that.
Could I jump
Mary?
in and make a comment? A couple of comments. There's a real theme here with the patient's stories, and it's diabetes, it's sugar, it's diabetic foot ulcers, and in terms of the reality is none of this stuff exists by itself. For example, 60 to 70% or more of critical limb ischemia patients have diabetes. And if you look at diabetic foot ulcers, if you look at that population, it's not just neuropathy. In fact, neuropathy by itself is a minor cause, one of the smaller causes. The vast majority, like 50, 70% or more of diabetic foot ulcers have critical limb ischemia. And I don't know if the doctors don't know this. I know that maybe 10 years or more ago, you would frequently see in the literature that, all diabetic foot ulcers are neuropathic. Well, they aren't. That's totally wrong. Now, whether the doctors don't know that or they don't tell the patients, I don't know. And my final comment about, and this is about minor amputations. This goes back to some comments that were made earlier. And again, there's the theme here. Nobody was tested before they had the minor amputation. I've given lectures, I've written some stuff on this. Minor amputations are just as bad as major amputations in terms of the consequences and the causes. But one of the key things is if you don't test the patient, you don't see what kind of circulation they have, you can cut off a toe, it won't heal. You cut off another toe, it won't heal because it's not getting adequate blood flow. So if they never test the patient, they're going to just keep cutting things off needlessly, and just creating, and it costs a ton of money to the healthcare system. It also, not to mention the terrible cost to the patient in terms of the emotional and psychological and the physical costs. And in fact, it was in one of my slides, I didn't emphasize it, but there's even way less diagnostic testing of any kind, where I'm not even talking angiograms. Any kind of diagnostic testing is massively underutilized prior to minor amputations. But there is this sort of thing out there, this idea amongst doctors that, oh, minor amputations, they're just minor, and it's okay if we do minor amputations. And it's not okay. It's just as bad, if not worse, than cutting off the leg.
Yeah, there's no, I'm sorry, as far as amputation is concerned, there is no, not even, amputation is amputation. It's gone. A part of your body is gone. There is no, I don't even understand that terminology. To me, it's offensive, because a body part is a body part. If you was born in this world with it, you should have it at any cost. And for doctors to know this, but still put you through it instead of fighting with you to find a better solution, they really just cut it off. And to me, that's brutal.
I really want to get into something else that's cultural, especially in our community of color, that I know I dealt with this in my family, and I still do, that we are people of faith, and we will believe and believe. And I know a lot of people that are going through health challenges, and they say I'm just going to pray about it and won't go to the doctor. And I believe that God has healing power, but you also have to do something on your part.
Exactly.
You have to do the footwork.
Absolutely, absolutely. So how do we reach those people that are just, I'm just going to pray about it? How do we get to them to a point that, yes, faith is great and faith goes a long way in healing, but you also need to go to the doctor also?
That's a great one. So I grew up in that family. We went to church every Sunday. We went to Wednesday Bible study, Friday afternoon Bible study. As a matter of fact, when I was in second grade, I was in the Bible league, that we called it, and I used to sit with the elders of the church, reading the Bible with them. So I know exactly what that means. And even in my own family, right? People will say, "Oh, I'm just going to pray about it and not go to the doctor." So for me, it's simple. Like when I talk with my family members, and I always ask them, "How long have you known me?" Right? You've known me since I was a kid. You helped raise me as parents and aunts and uncles. Don't you think that perhaps the knowledge that I have, that God could have contributed for me to be who I am? And so I think when we meet people who are very, faith-based, who would put aside medical treatment, I think it's important, it's incumbent upon us when we have these discussions to explain that, yes, faith is important. I've asked patients to pray for me, to pray for my team, to make sure that what we're going to do is going to be successful. But we have to be practical as well, meaning if we think that teachers and doctors and preachers and pastors are a venue that God utilizes to get things done on earth, then physicians are also within that same category. So I think it's important when we meet people of faith to make sure we have these open discussions and say, it's great to pray, but God also has given us this knowledge to do A, B, C, and D. And instead of using one in separation, we can use both together for good outcomes. I've had patients who've asked me and their families to pray before a procedure. To me, there's nothing more powerful than that. And so I think there's plenty of room to work with folks like that. But I think the challenge comes in is when you come across a person of faith that say, "Oh, I'm just going to pray about it and not do anything else," and we turn around and walk away from them. Because I think they're still seeking answers. And another thing that I've done personally especially the many years I spent in Louisiana, is every time I came across a faith leader, a preacher, a pastor, priests, deacons, I will treat them. And at the end, I will always ask them as a favor when they stand in front of the community talking to people to just spend the extra 3 or 4 minutes to talk with the congregation to let them know that they need to go to the doctor. And then when they go to the doctor, they have to ask for their numbers, blood pressure, heart rate, cholesterol, diabetes, all those kind of things as a favor, because those preachers came to me as patients with cardiovascular issues. And I always remind them that the people that you face every Sunday have the same problems that you have. So is there a way you can just take away 3 minutes from the sermon and tell them that they all need to go to the doctors? They need to quit smoking. A lot of them, I appreciate it because they never thought about it that way, that because they're in a position of authority. So I think as we talk about educating the community, as we talk about educating the nation, as we talk about starting a grassroots movement, these are among the things that we need to do. We need to reach out to those faith leaders who have access to the community and let them know about the things they can do to make things better for our community in general. And so we should embrace those folks and little by little trying to make those changes as we approach them. And like I mentioned earlier, with open hearts.
Thank you. Rodney, were you trying to get in?
One of the things that, I'm 66 years old. I had my leg amputated about 5.5 years ago. And when I first went to the doctor because I was having pain in my legs to where I couldn't do my job correctly, I went to the doctor and they did all kinds of tests and this and that. And then after like 3 or 4 appointments, they said to me, you have P.A.D. You have peripheral artery disease. I'm a fairly educated guy. I grew up in a very educated, motivational family. My father was a minister, by the way. And I had never heard of peripheral artery disease. I had no idea what it was. So in me going to the doctors in that capacity, when they started telling me, well, you have this, you need to do this, you need to do that, I almost slipped into the mode, well, he's the doctor, he knows what he's talking about. But for whatever reason, I decided to go to another doctor. And this doctor had totally different opinions on what I should do. And, well, the common themes are, quit smoking. But to have that vast of opinions on actually how to treat P.A.D. was so stifling. And I feel like, the doctors are in that position. I'm not going to say all doctors have this God complex. A lot of doctors have that, the ego. A lot of doctors have that type of atmosphere that they've been to school, they know what to do, when in actuality, there is no further training for a lot of doctors as far as P.A.D. Symptoms, what to do, how to alleviate those symptoms. I spent 7 years, in total agony because nobody knew what to do. And, it's just a question of education. You watch TV, watch a movie on TV, and during that 2-hour span, you will see at least 15 commercials about diabetes, about heart problems, about this, about that. I have never seen any educational information about P.A.D.
You're
and
absolutely.
That just leaves the
correct.
population totally vulnerable.
Yeah, you're correct. And in our next section, we're going to talk a little bit about the Black foot deception. it's, you know, it's bad enough when we struggle ourselves with understanding our symptoms, and it's even worse when the doctors don't understand our symptoms.